Welcome back to the Get Off the Treadmill podcast for small business owners and entrepreneurs, where we show you how to build a successful business and to have a life too. We're going to dive into another topic that helps us make more money in less time and to get off the treadmill so we can experience a life of significance. And now, your host and the author of the #1 best-selling business book, Making Money is Killing Your Business, Chuck Blakeman.
Today we're talking with Kelly Burns. I'm excited. Kelly's a wonderful friend, and I'm going to do something a little bit different today. I'm going to let Kelly introduce herself, but today we're going to talk about the 3 C's: connections, conversations, and customers/clients. Kelly, great to see you. How you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for
Cool.
having me. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah, so fill us in. Give us the 100-word bio. Hi, I'm Kelly. I'm great. Trust me.
Yeah, that's it. That was it. You nailed it. I'm Kelly. I'm great. You should trust me. No, I'm grateful to be here. I do a lot of things in the world, but one of my favorite things to do, and the thing that I'm really spending a lot of time doing right now, is an embodied coaching, both for somatic transformation, so helping people kind of come out of the cognitive overload space and back into their bodies to learn how to make decisions and to do transformational work in their lives. And then also specifically, I work with writers who are in different phases of projects and trying to kind of move that phase through. And I do a very specific type of coaching for writers called embodied coaching. It's called the praxis, and helping people find their stories and articulate them clearly. With that comes a whole myriad of things. I've been a yoga teacher for a long time, and I teach mindfulness, and I'm an academic researcher. So it's all the brain and body pieces.
Yeah, all the stuff that I used to call woo-woo crap.
Right.
And it's like, what? We don't need that. Let's just make a chair. Why do we need that? I'm too busy making chairs to do any of that stuff. So I don't see any impact. Yeah, and I spent most of my adult life as a recovering John Wayne rugged individualist. I feel like I'm kind of there now. I don't say I'm recovering anymore. I think I'm there. It doesn't mean I don't have my independent moments, but I really work hard to be interdependent and not dependent. And so I appreciate what you're doing, and I'll just affirm it to my audience that the fun thing about neuroscience is that neuroscience is proving a lot of this woo-woo crap.
Hmm.
And we're being able to see real direct correlations between emotional intelligence, empathy, and the ability to regulate yourself and co-regulate with other people, and how that comes out, if you wanted to, in how much more money you make, how happier you are, how much more fulfilled you live longer, all the good stuff. So, even if you don't believe in this stuff, if you want to live longer and make more money, you should dive in to what it means to get in touch with your body, your heart, your emotions, and all that other quote woo-woo crap. I just learned like a year ago where the word woo-woo comes from. And I don't know if it's true or not,
Oh.
but I looked it up once on the robot, and so I figured it's true. But the robot says woo-woo is a Chinese kind of thing, and it means mystery.
Hmm.
It
I
means,
love
something,
that.
yeah, so the things that we don't quite understand. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
there's,
that's so cool. I love that. I love
yeah,
finding out a root word. You're such a good nomenclature guy. Knowing
yeah.
and seeking the names of things matters
Yeah,
to people.
it has always been fascinating to me, because I think if there was any money in it, or I didn't even know it existed until I was a senior, this thing called cultural anthropology.
Yeah.
I knew there was bones anthropology because my dad wanted to do that and never did, but I didn't know there was that thing. So I love just like going to an amusement park and just sitting and studying the people.
Yeah.
I'd pay admission just to do that.
Yeah, part of my work in the world with like people and organizations is absolutely cultural anthropology work, because there are 4 things that we are wired for and across cultures, no matter time, space, and one of them is storytelling. One of
Yeah.
them is storytelling. And in cultural anthropology, you study the role of storytelling in teachers and visionaries, in medicine people and healers. People of any culture value it so deeply, and language is such an important part of that. And so I love that. It's true. Maybe you
But
are a cultural anthropologist, Chuck.
well, I am. I don't pay much attention to the academic world, so you are what you do, and so I regularly want to know the root words, the root language, the root meaning, because all of that has to do with how we think and how we perceive the world around us, and it's all really fascinating to me. So, which leads us
Yeah.
to figuring out how to build a business.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk about these 3 C's today. Maybe in our next podcast, we'll talk more about how all this stuff that we're talking about here actually comes out in real business terms. Today, I want to talk about this idea of building a system of keeping in touch with and, well, developing a steady stream of potential clients. I got onto this myself like 20 years ago because I didn't really like the sales part. I especially didn't like working with strangers and calling and doing all that fun stuff. And so I developed a way of doing this for myself that didn't include strangers. I just cut that part out. And it turns out it was actually a pretty good idea. So my last book that just came out about 10 months ago, Sell Less, Earn More, is the encapsulation of that 20 years. We've been teaching this 10-week course called Fast Track for those 20 years and finally wrote it down for all the people who haven't taken Fast Track. And so we're going to talk about just a piece of that today. This idea of the 3 C's and maybe the first domino. For me, those became incredibly important things that I had fun in the last 20 years working with other people on. So the 3 C's for our listeners: connections, conversations, and clients. And what does that mean? We're taking the traditional sales funnel and we're giving it a little bit more of a story, if you will, and a little bit more of a line to make it easier to grab hold to. I'm always looking for a handle by which to hold things in my brain. And so this allows me to have a handle for the business development process. I don't even like the word sales. The business development process, it gives me a handle for that. It helps me see where people are in that process. And more importantly, it helps me see what I need to do. The foundation for this was me learning from a guy a statement he liked to say like 21 years ago. I met this guy, and he would say, success is actually quite predictable. And I liked that. And it sounded reasonable. But then I realized failure is also quite predictable. And what makes them both predictable is that there's something that needs to be added on to that. Success is actually quite predictable when you're doing the right things. If you know that you want to get to lifting X amount of weights, you know you have to go to the gym. And success is actually quite predictable if you're doing the right thing. Go to the gym.
Yeah.
My problem with the business development thing was I didn't know what the right thing was. I was flailing all over the place, doing lots of stuff and hoping good things happen. So we came up with this process, the 3 C's. How many connections do you have to make to get a true buying conversation to get a client? And the classic sales funnel is like a 10-3-1 thing. I don't know who thought that up, but it's rarely anything close to that. So give me your experience right now or your thoughts around that. That was kind of a cheap overview from your perspective of learning these things in the last 3 or 4 months. What does it look like to you to have 3 C's that help you figure out how to actually know what to do that's the right thing?
That's so good. I have deeply appreciated being in Fast Track, and for anybody who's listening who's considering it, do it. It's well worth it. I think what it does is it brings things out of the ether and makes it concrete. So it's not magic, it's not a mystery. It's like, nope,
No.
just follow these, and so it's paradoxical because it gives you all the moving parts, but you have to move it around in your own puzzle. So that's really where the creativity, I think, comes as working through it, being a small business owner. So my experience of the 3 C's has been really interesting. And I would say for a couple reasons. One is that I'm finding and this is true, I would say for everyone, is to find the rhythm of the 3 C's that works for your day, your body type, your age, your context. And when I first started Fast Track, I was like, I'm exhausted by this. And I think it is because it's like anything when you're doing it performatively, where you think you have to do it like singing someone else's song.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to sing someone else's song, like, well, this is the strategy and do it just like that and follow directions. And that is an embodiment lesson that when you are singing someone else's song and you're masking, you will exhaust yourself. You will burn out. Those are recipes for disaster. So I think fairly early on, because I'm a Sagittarius and, Irish and stubborn and all the other, highly issue-ridden personality types, I have all of them. I was like, forget that. I'm going to do it a different way. And I was like, I can't do 10 connections a week. That will kill me. My body was like not built for it. And what do connections even look like? So It was really important for me to find a rhythm that worked for me, and with some ways to alter that worked for me was like while it was habit stacking, from the Atomic Habits book, it's like, well, while you're on a walk, so you're getting fresh air, you're getting your circadian rhythm, also just leave a couple voice texts for people that are authentic, that you want to check in with. And what I appreciate so deeply about your teaching, Chuck, in this program is that it has to be authentic to you. And this is what makes Fast Track different, is it's not like a package. It's here are the ingredients, but you have to cook the dinner that you want to eat. And if you're trying to cook something that somebody else is telling you to cook, it's not going to work. So it's really beautiful. I'm in the process of figuring out, like, what do I want to cook with this?
Yeah.
I know these important ingredients, and like, how's it going to work for me? You
Yeah,
know?
and I didn't really know anything about this when I first started this. One of my great weaknesses and strengths is I rarely look at what other people have done, regardless, whatever it is I want to do. I rarely look at what other people have done about that before I try and figure it out myself. I just go
Mm.
ahead and run into it. I might read, I might, but I will figure it out before I look at, well, how have other people applied this? And it was 2 or 3 years into Fast Track, people were telling me what other sales courses were like. And I was thinking, oh, wow, that's different. And I realized that one of the things that we've done intuitively is we've created something which is a really solid, practical, tactical framework that still allows you to be you. It's not
Mhm.
me telling you, well, here's the 27 things I did every week for 2 years straight. And unless you do exactly what I do, you will not. Apparently, that's what a lot of sales courses are. It's regurgitating the process.
Mhm.
We give you the tools and then you figure out, well, who's Kelly and how do I apply the 3 C's? And off you go from there. And that's probably part of my personality, my background, and never wanting to be boxed in as well. So I don't want to box other people in on that. But I also found it really relational. That
Mm.
this is, the book is called Sell Less, Earn More. Where the working title was actually Serve, Don't Sell,
Mm. Yeah.
because the fundamental premise we start with is that business is not transactional primarily, even though it's all about giving somebody a product and getting money. That's very transactional. Why do people do that? Well, every guru in the world has identified why, because people know, like, and trust you. It's relational. Business is first and foremost relational. So we're dealing with something here that is a relational construct. How do I connect with people? I had one guy, I couldn't get him out of the habit of using the word contacts. I contacted 10 people this week. And I would ask him, could you just say I connected with, or I contacted, he wouldn't even say that. I
Mm.
contacted 10 names in my database.
Mm.
And I said, could you maybe say you connected with 10 people you know?
Mm.
Do you
Well,
hear
and I
the
would,
difference in those?
yeah, yeah. And as somebody who works with the layers of the body, which also includes, the energy field that extends from the body, is I would say you could probably contact people without connecting at all,
Yes. And
you
vice
know?
versa.
And vice versa. And
Yeah.
so that's really an interesting nuanced space to be like, connection is a felt sense. And
Yeah. And it's,
and I was going to say that's the other thing that feels different about Fast Track is this is moving your way through, feeling your way through before you know your way through. And
yeah.
that's a very interesting and appropriate to what I do totally way. And it's very uncomfortable. Like that's not comfortable to somebody
No.
who would be like, I have contacts. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. We have this thing called the amygdala, which I guess I'm hearing is the oldest part of our brains, the lizard brain, the
Uh-huh.
antique brain. And, and the antique brain still thinks that the next bush has a saber-toothed tiger behind it that's going to eat us. And so we're uncomfortable with anything that isn't known before we do it. Uh,
Yeah.
I get that. That's difficult for us. And yet, again, neurology is showing us the only way we grow is by making mistakes, by errors. The one I listen to is, if somebody's trying to learn how to do free throws with a basketball, if they magically put the first 10 shots through the hoop, they've learned nothing.
That's right.
If they
That's
put
right.
2 out of 10 through the hoop, they've learned tons. And the likelihood of them beating the guy who put all 10 through in the long run is much higher. So being uncomfortable, we're made to be uncomfortable. That's where we should be, is to figure out how do we live with and invite in this little bit of discomfort, this dis-ease that says, I'm not sure where I'm at right now. That means I'm growing. Yay. So, yeah, you can read my book, but you still have to apply it. And that's where you'll get a little bit uncomfortable. But we also feel like you shouldn't feel panicked or in chaos or anything. It should be kind of a measured risk uncomfortability. Hey, I'm pretty
Mhm.
sure this will work. I'm just not sure I have the muscle built for it yet. I know that I can lift X amount of pounds if I just do this regularly. So it's a measured risk.
Yeah. And I think in each of those exchanges, I'm still learning, like, oh, what am I doing? Who am I? And, it's so interesting because people, if we're only learning in failure, you can't really fail if you're just siloed and doing things alone. Like, failure is
Right.
inherently also you engaging with something or
Oh, yeah.
someone or community. And it's
Yeah.
like,
It's a community thing.
you're gonna have to like be in the world, engaging with people, and possibly publicly fall on your face in a
Yeah.
conversation or not know how to close it or not know how to ask the right question. And I'm learning about myself in that space too. Like where I push up against attention in the three C's are my learning edges. Like, oh, that's uncomfortable. Ooh.
Yeah. And so this goes along with that, the idea of success and failure and how we've treated that throughout my own life and throughout all my books and my coaching and what I've learned from other people. And I love what Disraeli, a British politician from the late 1800s, said, treat victory and defeat as the
Mhm.
imposters that they are. I just love that. They're
Mhm.
imposters. And so, should we look at getting involved in something in public and not doing it perfectly? Well, we might see that as failure. That's one way to look at it.
Mhm.
But what if we
Yeah.
saw it as fascinating? What if we saw it as a way to learn? Hey, this is, that wasn't quite what I wanted to have happen. That's fascinating. How do I make it different now that I've done it once? And for me, it's always been comforting to understand this by using the analogy of learning to ride a bike. I don't know
Mhm.
anybody who learned how to ride a bike by reading books.
Right.
And I don't know anybody who didn't get on a bike who wasn't uncomfortable to begin with.
And I'm gonna maybe argue into this thesis or this conversation as a business person who I'm not. I'm a humanities person, like by far. All of my background's in the
Well,
humanities.
and the best humanities people will make the best business people, so you're good.
Yeah, that maybe selling, which is just an exchange of your service or your product to someone who needs it, who really will be served by it, is you can't really do it disembodied in a way where you're going to receive the thing that you are actually seeking as a solopreneur, which is there's this felt sense of like, I'm offering a service or a chair, whatever. I'm offering learning that will feel so good to exchange with someone. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it. I would
Right?
not be willing to go through the challenge of this because it's very challenging if
Yeah.
I didn't really have that exchange experience of like deep satisfaction. And so all of this work that we're learning to do in the three C's method is embodiment work. And I think if you're disembodied doing it, you won't actually ever find your first domino because you're going to be doing, there's like armor, you're armored up in it and you're going to hit a wall. I haven't studied the data on it, but that's like, I really feel that. And what I'm leaning into, and here's an example. I had a woman who wanted to come to a retreat and she's unemployed and I really want her there because she needs it. She needs to do the writing. And
Right?
also I have to pay my bills and provide for the retreat. And so we were working on what would an exchange be? We have to have some exchange, but it doesn't have to be money.
Right?
And so every retreat that I have, I serve people this beautiful lunch, homemade gluten-free things. And she was like, well, I have a side catering business. Could I do the food for the day in exchange?
Ah, there you go.
And we're both getting what we need. We're both going
Yeah.
to get what we need. And it felt as good to me to receive that exchange with her because I know that she's going to get the service that she needs for that day. And she is coming in with an exchange that works for her, that is
Yeah.
not depleting her.
And that's a great example of exchange because too often exchange isn't really something you needed. Like, well, I don't need this picture you just painted for me. I have enough art, but I'll take it in
Hmm.
exchange for, well, that's maybe not the best exchange, but that's a great exchange because you're reducing your monetary output for her to do that anyway. So good for
And
you.
my time. I just
And
got
your
two
time,
hours
yeah.
back.
That's what I mean.
Hmm.
Yeah, time and money. I think in terms of those being expensive. So yeah,
Hmm.
let's talk about this first domino thing. It's connected to the three C's. We've got connections, conversations, and clients. So the idea is that you make 10 connections, which could be an hour-long conversation. A lot of times it's just, hey, would you like to get together and talk about your business, my business, see if there's a fit. That's a connection. A conversation, from our perspective, just to use three C's, is really a buying conversation, which means that we only count it as the second C if They know and we know that when we get together, we're going to talk about our business and see if there's a fit and ask them to give it a try. That's the second C. And then the third C is they become a client or a customer, and or they don't, and we continue to build relationships with them, and they do that later if they want to at all. So those are the three C's. The first two C's are a place that were mysterious to me when I first started doing this. And it took a long time for me to figure out that I needed to define what was my first activity in business. And I came to this by, I don't know, maybe I was actually watching somebody on TV. You see these people who spend like 3 months building a room full of dominoes stacked, all over the place with all kinds of little things. Like, it's just crazy. And then they hit the first domino, and in 30 seconds or in a minute, everything is down. And I don't know if I was watching, I feel like I was watching one when it dawned on me, business is exactly like that. Every business has a first domino. There is a first activity, a first starter that every business does. Without fail, every business has a first starter of some sort. That if you do that first thing and you do it right, it will begin to knock down all the other dominoes in your business, from finding the client to getting the client to getting paid to making the chair, delivering the chair, getting the money, putting it in your bank. All of that stuff happens because you did this one thing.
Yeah.
And that's a really powerful thing to come to realize that every business has that. So I went on a pursuit of that for myself, and that's where we got the three C's. And I learned that for everybody, again, to your point, not everybody's the same, but I learned for everybody that generally their first domino is either going to be connections or buying conversations. It's going to be one of those two things. And you want to learn how many of those you need in order to get X number of clients in whatever time. So if you want one client a week, for my example, I learned that if I wanted one client a week, I had to have 4.28 buying conversations a week, about 4.25 buying conversations. So I scheduled 5. And I learned that by having buying conversations. To your point, I wasn't comfortable with it. I only learned it by doing it and writing things down and keeping a checklist on an Excel spreadsheet or a napkin. And I learned that over time, if I talked to a little over 4 people a week, they would buy something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's great. Then how many connections do I need in order to get those 4 conversations? I started at 35 a week, but I was cheating, to your point, since I never talked to strangers to do any of this. And that's how we do all this. I had a lunch. I built this lunch, and I did invite all the people I knew and ask them to invite people I didn't know. And it started out, I think we had 20 people there the first lunch, and then 12 the second lunch, and then 6 the third lunch. And I think by the fourth lunch, it was like 3 of us. And I wondered if we should keep doing this. And then I thought, well, I'll give it one more week. And then there were 8. And I thought, well, I'll give it one more week. And then it was 10. And we got to where there was 50 to 75 people coming to this lunch every week. And 15 or 20 of them were people I haven't met before. So at the end of my lunch, I would ask, just as a thing to the whole audience, they bought their lunch and I talked businessy stuff and led conversations on that. And then I would just say, at the end of the lunch, hey, if anybody in here would love to get a cup of coffee with me and talk about whether you could get help with your business, I'd love to do that. And I might be able to get some help from you. And so that gave me like 20 connections in one fell swoop. And then the rest of them were easy from there. But I got it down to 8, 5, and 1 over time. I started with 35 was my connection, or my first domino. 35 connections was my domino. And over time, took me about a year, I realized, no, for me, my first domino was actually the 5 cups of coffee. I need to make sure that I have 5 cups of coffee a week. That is my first domino activity. And if that happens, if I get 5 cups of coffee a week, the rest of my business is going to be okay. Success is actually quite predictable when you're doing the right thing. That's my story. Relate to me how it's unfolding for you. And I know you've only been doing this for a few months, but that's usually the more valuable place to start, because I forget what this was like when I did it the first 3 months, 4 months.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I'm still learning mine. And I think what I'm learning is when I am having a connection, when I'm having a buying conversation, how much energy, and when that person's then converting to being a client in some form or a lumberjack, which I have actually had a lot of success with in these last couple weeks.
Yeah.
And I think one thing I'm learning about my first domino is, and I think maybe it falls somewhere kind of in between the two, is that there has to be a smaller number, but an in-depth experience. So the connection or the buying conversation, either one, and they sometimes bleed over for me, And it's maybe the buying conversation, although it doesn't start out that way. But if there's a depth of conversation and the energy is focused and kind of almost protected, like
Yeah.
that almost always, if there's two or three of those a week, will convert to some kind of client or lumberjack.
Yeah.
And what I'm noticing is the number is less than the energy and the depth of the conversation
Yeah.
is.
The sincerity, the energy, the depth,
The
the leaning in,
sincerity.
yeah, all of
Yeah.
that stuff, the listening, what we call tier three listening, where you really are trying to ask yourself, what do they think and feel about themselves, and how can I enter into that? And
That's
yeah,
kind
and the
of been
deeper you get to
the
that.
that's a magic. That's been kind of magic for me is if I'm rushed, tired, I'm not fully present, and I still have the same number of buying conversations, it's not the same output. But if I am like well rested and I'm taking care and I block time on either side and I'm really present and I'm really listening and asking good questions, it's the quality that's transferring. And I would say right now that it's a three of those a week and real quality is transferring to at least a lumberjack or a client in small and big ways.
Yeah.
That's really interesting to me, which means I have to go backwards and protect my schedule and I have to protect my care
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah.
you know?
Sidebar, free, no extra charge, but my time in the morning is titled rest. When I'm just breathing and sitting quietly with myself and looking at my schedule and reading a little bit, that's called rest, the pathway to a fruitful and successful life. And it's a very odd thing for me for 60 plus years to get up in the morning and rest. It's like, I don't need rest. I just slept. But to your point, it creates much more power and energy for me throughout the rest of the day if I take that time, and then other times during the day to go for a walk. And again, I love neurology for these reasons because it keeps proving all this woo-woo stuff. Sure
Mhm.
enough, we're not built to work 8 hours a day. We're built in basically 15-minute increments up to 90 minutes max before we blow up. And so do something really intensely for 15 minutes and then take a 2 or 3 or 4 minute break and do it again for 15 minutes and do 90 minutes of that and go for a 10-minute walk.
Mhm.
And you'll be much more productive, or a 15-minute walk. And reality of it is, they knew this before neurology figured it out, that the average person at work actually invests about somewhere between 2 and a maximum of 5 hours a day in actually doing something productive
Yeah.
in an 8 to 10 hour day. Two and a
Yeah.
half is more normative. And yet you sit there for the whole time. So
That's how schools are. I mean, we're trained people that from a very young age, institutions, that is a controlling mechanism.
yeah, and it all comes from the factories. When we thought 8 hour shifts were their way to live life, that's normal. No,
Mhm.
that's not how the farmer did it when they had cows. They milked their cows and then they kicked the soccer ball with their kids and then they did something else and then they had lunch with their wife. And so we're not
Yeah.
built that way. So yeah, that was free, no extra charge. But I want to get back to a few things you highlighted that are really important. Lumberjacks, and what you just talked about was this idea that we talk about when you say that I'll ask, is what you said basically the more relationally attuned I am, the more likely this conversation is to end up in me connecting and having a client?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So again, I was trying to give myself handles for this stuff. And so you heard me say early on in Fast Track, I learned this principle because I started out very transactional in life and
Mhm.
learned that business over time is relational. And I learned this principle: the closer you get to a hug, the more likely you are to sell something. An
Mhm.
advertisement is a very far distance from a hug, which is why it takes so much time and money to finally get somebody to trust you via some kind of advertising. And direct mail is a little bit closer, and a phone call is even closer, and Zoom is even closer, but sitting across the table from each other and then just tuning in relationally and being emotionally intelligent and empathetic, it's the golden chalice of business. And again, research has shown very emphatically in the last 15 years that people who show a high level of emotional intelligence, actually, the research says people who have an average emotional intelligence will regularly outperform people with very high IQs.
Mhm. Hmm.
And apparently, Harvard understood this 50 years ago. There's been a joke running around Harvard that Harvard people will say the people who go to MIT work for the people who go to Harvard.
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
MIT is supposedly transactional and geeky and engineering, and Harvard is supposedly, of course, none of that is necessarily true, but you get the point that being across the table from someone and actually tuning in and saying, what do they think? What do they feel? And my default was always to just mansplain at them for 45 minutes with my PowerPoint and see if I could get them to light up about anything that was on my slide deck and
Yeah,
not hear them at all.
yeah, I think the inherent ingredient there, and there's two things I want to say. One is what this inherent ingredient is, and two is that this is important to hear for anyone who doesn't, like for me, that doesn't have a business background, that wouldn't have initially labeled themselves, I'm businessy, or could see themselves doing that. But that if you are relational, if you are attuned, that you actually might be far more cut out for being a business person than you once
Yeah.
suspected, right? Because the
Yes.
messaging is not normal. And the
Yeah.
inherent sort of ingredient that's present, and it's true when you're coaching someone too, is that you have to trust yourself.
Yeah.
You can't go in with a script and be like, and this is then when I'm going to say this sentence frame. There
Mhm.
is this element of trusting yourself that you have to practice, that you're going to know what to say in response to where they are when it arrives, and you can't pre-plan for it. And the
Yeah.
only way you can prepare is to be fully present.
Yeah. And that's a skill we'll work at. I know I will the rest of my life. But
Yeah.
it's the holy grail of business. And the reason for that is because it's not a business principle, it's a life principle. And I
Yeah.
learned I became aware 15 or so years ago that any business principle that doesn't work in every other aspect of my life is not a good business principle.
Yeah, that's the
It's
truth.
got to work across the board because we are who we are and we need to be authentic and relational and consistent across the board. So, for our audience, how do you find out whether you need 4 cups of coffee? Well, you do this 10 or 12 weeks in a row, you keep your numbers, and you
Mhm.
look at it and say, well, it looks like after 12 weeks or after 6 weeks or after 14, it looks like I'm getting 3, 4, 5 people that I meet with, and I'm getting 1.5 new clients per. That's how you find this stuff out, as you do it. And that's a whole other book I haven't published that I wrote a long time ago that wasn't ready for prime time, but maybe I'll get it back out. And the premise of the book, it's about planning and how we do way too much of it. And the premise of the book is planning doesn't create movement, movement creates the plan. So you're in that process of, after just a few months of doing this activity, recording this activity, and then looking back at those lagging indicators of success and saying, well, what is working? So you're not there yet, but you probably have some kind of gut for how many of each one of those first 2 C's that are necessary, and maybe which one you're leaning toward as this is my first domino.
Mm-hmm. For me, it's the conversations because they
Okay.
tend to last longer. And I think there's right now my number for that is 3 real conversations a week. And that also feels true in my nervous system. Like that's about my
Yeah.
max,
Yeah.
about like what is required of me and those to be good and true is about 3 a week. And my average since we started has been 1 to 2 clients in some way or 1 to 2 lumberjacks in there. And it's been
Yeah.
great. I mean, it's been such a surprise. It does kind of feel like magic. And that's remarkable, but that it's actually not magic. And as a former teacher, or maybe as a lifelong teacher, knowing that something's not magic and that it's replicable is deeply comforting to me. Like,
Yeah.
nope, you can actually just do that again and again and again and again.
Well, Kelly, that was the magic of it for me as well. It was magic for me to figure out that it wasn't magic. That was the magic. It was
Right.
like, wow, if I just keep my numbers, if I keep some data, write it down, it's real simple. I got these
Mhm.
3 things I want to write down. How many connections, how many conversations gets me how many clients? I write that down and I find out what I actually need to do every week. Huh, that's really incredible how simple that could be. To understand that success is actually quite predictable because we're doing the right thing. And it might change over time. The economy might change, your delivery might change, your product might change. And so your 3 C's at some point, there's no way I would keep this stuff forever. I did this for like 6 or 7 months the first time around. And then maybe a year and a half later, I did it for another 3 months and it came up slightly different. But I would
Mhm.
do it if I felt like it wasn't being successful. If things were changing, then I'd get right back on this horse and keep those numbers because it would tell me, maybe I don't have enough connections. Maybe I have not enough conversations. So I love that you're seeing this in a flexible way and seeing it how it works for you, because that's how I think we're going to be successful in life, is to be true to what works for us. pick and choose what comes to us from the rest of the world and then apply it in a way that works for us. And that's really the big news here. The other thing you talked about was lumberjacks, and that's code. It sounds like a cult we're in, but you know,
It's been my favorite thing, Chuck. That's my favorite discovery. And actually, I love it. And I didn't know I was good at that, but that's what I've been doing my whole life, is just
yeah.
building lumberjack exchanges. That's
Well,
like
same here.
that.
Yeah, but same here. I realized before I put together this course 20 years ago that I had been doing that in my 13 businesses. I had always gone for lumberjacks because I don't like talking to strangers and trying to stab them with my business card and try and get them to like me. It just didn't work. So I'm ambitiously lazy, and I also found out it was actually easier. What if instead, and the analogy we use, instead of going to the forest, which would be a networking event, instead of going to the forest where there's 100 trees, there's 100 people there, and you have to sift through the 100 trees to find the one Chanticleer pear tree, which might be your client. You don't even have time to do that in the 2 hours of the networking group. So you're walking around stabbing people with your business card and walking away in the middle of conversations because you're pressed for time. You got to find that Chanticleer pear. And we're looking for one customer at a time. And then we find the tree and we chop the tree down, and then we have to season the wood. So we have to build the relationship. And so we have to do that. And finally they become a client. What do? We go back to the forest. We get one tree at a time. What if, and this was a huge, what we call blinding flash of the obvious for me, a huge BFO for me. What if I found someone who had done all that work for years,
Yes.
had all those connections in their database that loved them, and I could just convince them to actually begin to feed me those relationships and tell those people, hey, you're going to like Chuck. What if I found one lumberjack instead of one tree at a time? Hello.
It's so much better. God,
Yeah.
for all the introverts listening, please just follow Chuck's advice. And I think that's an aha for me too, is that I'm a social introvert. Like, I love people. I love them in my soul. I am not fed and recharged by their energy though. I have
Yeah.
to do that alone. So
Yeah.
the more people I'm around, the more taxing it is on my
Yeah.
container. And
Yeah.
so lumberjacks are the solution for introverted business people.
Yeah.
And it's so authentic because it's just be
Yeah.
yourself with a smaller number.
And it's even the cure for being, or the right thing to do for people who are just lazy.
Yes,
I'm ambitiously lazy. Why? I'm going to work really hard now to find me a lumberjack so that down the road I can stop stabbing people, strangers, with my business card. So,
Yeah, I
well,
love that.
we've kind of run out of time here. How can people get a hold of you to connect with you on some of your retreats or maybe some of your coaching? Give me some way for them to figure out how to get a hold
Oh,
of you.
that's great. Thank you. Yeah, they can just go to my website. It's really easy. It's kellyburns.net. And my name is a complete sentence. So it's Kelly, K-E-L-L-Y, and Burns, the action, B-U-R-N-S. And it's really easy to find me. I'd love to support people and organizations in doing the sort of transformational changes that they are sort of feeling but don't quite know how to do. And I so appreciate that. Shout out.
And I'll shout out for you because I know that you're so good at that. You're good at translating what we thought is the woo-woo mystery stuff to actually making it work for the rest of the people who've never had any touch with that stuff. You're really good at translating. So,
Thank
well, it's
you.
been fun. We've just scratched the surface, but look forward to talking to you more.
Thanks, Chuck.
That wraps up another episode of the Get Off the Treadmill podcast. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and hit the like button to ensure you are receiving the latest tools you need to grow your business and to get off the treadmill. If you want more information on the 3 to 5 Club, the Crankset Group, or to book Chuck as a business advisor, speaker, or workshop leader, you can contact us at grow@cranksetgroup.com. Until next time, have a great week.